What up, Player Profiler Nation? It's Matty Kiwoom. Welcome to the latest episode of The Game Plan. The backdrop is different. I've made the move. The family's in the new house. So there's going to be a new studio getting set up in good time. It's going to take some time, but in some time you'll see the new studio. But got the bar behind me. Good vibes here. And we need some good vibes because we are diving into the first week of the fantasy playoffs. If you have a bye, congrats, sit back, relax, enjoy the weekend slate. But if you're in the middle of it, if you're in the thick of it, if you're trying to get to those semis and beyond, you got to be here. You got to tune into the game plan because I got a very, very special guest, and we are going through everything 5 burning questions, the 5 most important questions of the week, and then we're going to dive into the bargain bin. So, ladies, gentlemen, children of all ages, get out your pens and your pads, and let's start game planning to get those Week 15, a.k.a. those first-round playoff dubs. Planners, my guest today is fairly new to the Player Profiler family, but this man has come out on fire since he's been rocking with us here at Player Profiler. You may have seen him all over the TikToks on all of our Player Profiler TikTok accounts. He's also hosted the Start a Stream show on the TikTok channel. So each of you guys, all of you owe him a very special thank you for getting those rosters right on Sundays to help you get those wins. And his new show, Hits and Misses, debuted last week, and I highly recommend everyone checks it out. He's given a wrap-up for the week, giving those hits and those misses, so make sure you check it out. And everybody, please, gang, give it up for my man, Tumi Oredein. What's up, Tumi?
How's it going, Matty? How's it going?
Good, man, good. I'm excited to have you on. Like I said, I've seen you all over the place on TikTok. I'm scrolling TikTok. Boom, there you are. Boom, there you are. Hosting on Sundays, getting people's rosters right. Now you got hits and misses. So I reached out. I was like, hey, man, you did me a solid last week because you did. You filled in for me on Start a Stream. I had something pop up, and you're the man for that. But yeah. I'm glad to have you on the game plan, my friend.
I appreciate you having me on. Whoa. I appreciate you having me on. I'm so tired from all the game prep, all the stuff happened this week, but I'm very excited to give out what we think we could do to help these people win the first week of the playoffs is so important.
Yes, it's so important. You want to get in the semis because when you're in the semis, most league structures, if you're playing for something on the last week, you're playing for some money, even if it's just your money back on the year, what have you, trying to get some scratch out of it. So yeah, she's ready. Your daughter is ready to go, ready for week 15. We see some questions already piling up in the chat. We'll get to those in a minute, but we got those 5 big questions. What I think are the 5 biggest questions for week 15. We got to get those answered here because we can't go through all the start-sit questions. So we got some big picture stuff. Hopefully the answers lie somewhere in what we're talking about. So Tumi, my friend, let's get to the question number 1. Give me some must-start players. Who are the guys that need to be in fantasy lineups in week 15?
So this one may be a little counterintuitive, and obviously, if he's not healthy, you're not going to put him in your lineup. You got to play Geno Smith. Geno Smith, the matchup is amazing. Amazing. The easiest matchup on the season over the last 3 weeks, giving up 10 touchdowns over the last 4. This matchup against the Eagles, they're giving up 36 points to the opposing team every week. They're giving up 26 fantasy points to quarterback position every week. And Darius Slay, he's dinged up. But outside of that, honestly, the whole Philly team is relatively healthy. I think they're going to be rather mad. And I actually think that this is going to be a game where they're going to put up points. Geno's going to have to come back and put up some points at home in Seattle.
I love the Geno Smith call. He's got the dream matchup, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
The Philly's been bad all year against quarterbacks. In their last 3, they've given up the most points to opposing fantasy quarterbacks. So the recent sample size, if you want to weigh it out, it's still very juicy for Seattle. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. You brought up the most important part for this matchup. Philly's going to be pissed.
Very.
Philly's going to want to win. Philly's not going to back down. They're going to try to score a ton of points. They're going to get out their frustrations of getting their asses whooped by the Cowboys last week on Sunday Night Football. So they're going to come out swinging, and Seattle's been pretty game. Even with Drew Lock last week, he was able to get Tyler Lockett fantasy relevant. He was able to get DK Metcalf fantasy relevant. So this offense is playing pretty good. And then you bring a pissed off Philly team that can't stop a nosebleed when it comes to the passing game. We love that. So I love me some Geno Smith this week. A player that I'm saying is a must start, somebody that you need in your lineup no matter what. And that's none other than Jerome Ford.
Okay.
Jerome Ford's been a unsung hero. The problem with Ford is his fantasy output hasn't eclipsed the 20 mark. You're not seeing his 25 fantasy points. You're not seeing a massive, massive week, but he continuously gets double digits. He continuously is the lead back. And then when you look at this matchup against the Bears have not been good against opposing running backs in terms of stopping them from scoring fantasy points all season. In recent weeks, the last three, they actually have given up the sixth most fantasy points on the slate. It's in Chicago, but the conditions don't look all that bad. I know this time of year, I don't know about you, Tumi, but I have like a whole burnt in my weather app on my iPhone on Saturdays and Sundays. What is we looking at? What are we looking at? What are we looking at? Because we all remember the Bears Buffalo Bills game last year. That was the first round of the playoffs. It was negative 100 degrees in Chicago.
Yeah, like
Chicago. It's crazy.
Unhuman, not non-human level weather at all. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, we're talking about just Antarctica level frost.
Yeah, for sure.
So now I'm very, very conscious of that, making sure that I'm looking into it. And then also that defense, the running backs, there is a little bit of running back funneling that happens when you go against his defense. I mean, Johnson has been atop of my cornerback ranking since like week 4. I mean, he's been the guy there. Tyreek Stevenson's playing a little bit better. Kyler Gordon in the slots playing a little bit better the last few weeks. So there is a little bit of funneling that happens to the running back. So I'm saying you got to play some Jerome Ford. Anyone else that you want to touch upon that's just start for you?
Yeah, like I think, and I honestly, that's really touching on one of the players I may be avoiding in that game in one of our later questions, based on how much they funnel towards the run in that defense. But another player I think that is like an absolute must start, and I'm a sucker for narratives. I really am.
Dude, that's how you can dominate in fantasies if you can latch onto the right narratives, predict the right ones.
And getting into the feelings of these players. Like D-Hop. Yeah, I mean D-Hop versus the Texans. He was very adamant saying this is just another game. I get it. I'm not really hyped up for this one. The first time he played them, he gave us 18 plus fantasy points in PPR. I think that he could do the same thing again. I think the Titans could easily win this game with a beat up Texans team on the other side of it. And I think that DeAndre Hopkins is just going to be getting so many targets. He's starting to connect a little bit more with Will Levis. I think he's one of the safer plays to me. I'm probably going to be starting him over DJ Moore, Cortland Sutton, people in that ilk. Yeah.
Right. Oh, I love that narrative. And then you want to spin even more narrative around that, the narrative web around that game. I mean, Tennessee is coming out A+ trolling. They're rocking the Oilers uniforms against Houston at home. I mean, they are looking to take them down. They are. And there's going to be no CJ Stroud, no Nico Collins. Case Keenum is getting the start. They said, Davis Mills, thanks, but no thanks. We're going to go with the vet here. I love that call. I'm going to actually touch upon that game in the bargain bin segment, so stick around for the bargain bin. Another player that is a must start for me, he is my start of the week. This is my go-to guy. You probably have a pretty good roster if you haven't been starting this player, but these are the rosters that we're talking to nowadays because we're talking about the playoff teams. If you haven't been starting Zay Flowers, first of all, congrats on having a good enough team to not have to start Zay Flowers, but that is my start of the week. You got to start Zay Flowers. Sunday Night Football against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Their secondary's been beat up. They've given up the third most fantasy points over their last 3 games to opposing wide receivers. And we're looking about a potential shootout. It's got a pretty high over-under. It's on the upper half of the slate. And the conditions, again, I'm going to harp on the conditions because they matter this time of year. They look pretty good in that Sunday night affair. Jacksonville, Baltimore, huge, just not necessarily playoff ramifications. I guess there are some.
Yeah.
There are some, right? Because Jacksonville's back to fighting. They were ahead of the pack. Now they're back to the pack. Baltimore's trying to establish that 1 seed. But what they are trying to do, they're trying to jockey for who's got that leverage in terms of who's the alpha in the AFC. It's not the Chiefs. They keep losing. They can't get it right. Right? It ain't the
At
Chiefs.
all.
No. So Baltimore's trying to put their mark down. Jacksonville's going to be coming out gaming. So I think this game has a lot of fantasy points to be scored, and Zay Flowers can torch that secondary. And it's going to be easier work for him because they're not having to just, he was like a volume guy in the beginning of the year. He wasn't as efficient, but now Odell Beckham is opening that pass game. Rashad Bateman is getting involved here and there. And then Isaiah Likely is doing just fine picking up that tight end role. So I love me some Zay Flowers for sure this week. So get him in your lineup if you haven't already. Make sure he is in that lineup. Get you that week one of the first week of the playoff win. That's what we're looking for here.
I love that call because it seems like we're finally starting to see the Todd Monken offense that we had kind of been promised, where like we're seeing not pass first, but we're just going to put everything on Lamar and go. Like, I mean, it's unfortunate for the running back situation, but for all the receivers, like they are just letting it loose and let him chuck the ball down the field. Zay Flowers is a number one guy in that. And I do think, like, for some reason, I thought the total was lower than I was expecting it to be. I fully am expecting a shootout in Duval, so I agree with that 100%.
All right. So we got Zay Flowers in here. Geno Smith, make sure you get him in. Make sure you get DeAndre Hopkins in the narrative game of all narrative games.
Yep.
And then, of course, Jerome Ford. Don't be shying away from Joe Ford. Talk about some players that are must starts. Let's go to the other. But actually, before we do, let's answer a question. What do you think? You want to answer a quick question in the chat?
Yeah, sure.
Let's do that. So Kareem, shout out to Kareem Baldwin in the chat. Ty Chandler over Jerome Ford. I'm leaning Chandler. The upside, him being the bell cow plus Cincy defense versus running backs. Is he crazy? I just talked about Jerome Ford, so I'm going to give this one to you, Tumi. Is it Chandler or is it Ford?
They're back to back in like my personal rankings. Mm-hmm. I've been flipping back and forth. I'm going to go with Jerome Ford slightly. You honestly, you convinced me. Like with the information. But also,
I like that.
Like the matchup, that's one of those things where if you just look at it over the last few weeks, like sure, Cincinnati's an easy matchup. It hasn't really been an easy matchup. They've given up a lot of red zone touches and like touchdowns, but they're not like they're a top of the league defense, like top 15 at least. I think Ty Chandler is a volume play. Same thing with Jerome Ford, but I just think that Jerome Ford's matchup's a little easier in that type of game. So that's what I'm going to go with. Yeah,
it's close. It's definitely close, but I'm going to go Ford. I talked about it earlier. And you brought up exactly the point that I was going to make for Kareem was, they've, over the course of the season, they're like a middle-of-the-road matchup. But over the last 3 games, Cincinnati's been pretty stout against the run. They've only given up a handful of fantasy points per game. They're actually 27th in fantasy points allowed over the last 3 games. So it's a tougher matchup. And since they're so close in the rankings, give me the better matchup and give me the Joe Flacco-led offense.
Yeah.
Listen, my hands are up to me. I don't know what to say.
I don't know either, man.
I don't know what to say. So let's move on to question number 2. Who are the players that you can't advise enough that these fantasy managers get them out of their lineups?
This may be like a theme that continues throughout this show. I cannot trust Kansas City players overall, but the Kansas City running backs, I just can't do it this week. New England is number 1 against the running backs over the last 3 to 4 weeks. They've allowed a total yards over the last 3 weeks of 208, including rushing and receiving for running backs. It's a situation where a split backfield against a run-suffocating defense in a very low-scoring game where the Chiefs will be very happy to win this game 13-3. Like, I am not interested in this situation. Hopefully, I mean, maybe one of the running backs would score, but I mean, I would bet on if anyone's going to score, Rice, Kelsey, somebody like that probably getting into the end zone before one of the other two do.
The thing about this offense is they don't need to win 30-20 anymore. They can win 13-10. Let's face it, New England ain't doing anything this year. Last week was a complete anomaly because even last week, you look at the points that they scored and you go, wow, that's a pretty good output. It happened in the first, handful of drives, and then they completely went back to turning into a pumpkin. I have no faith that this team is going to be able to push the pace. Chiefs are going to be pissed for a number of reasons. First of all, the Patriots are so bad they got flexed out on Monday night. That's going to piss them off. They're coming off a brutal loss to the Buffalo Bills at home, so they're going to be pissed off. And they need to get this team going. And I think getting this offense going is through the air. It's getting Patrick Mahomes some touchdowns. It's getting the ball to Rice, to Kelsey, the guys you mentioned. And the thing about this, with no Isaiah Pacheco, are you going to trust CEH, Tumi?
Not at all. Not after last week.
CEH. Not after, right. He had 8 fantasy points. He got all the volume in the world, but guess who got the goal line touchdown?
Yep.
Jerick McKinnon. And I'm also not going to trust Jerick McKinnon. The reason why I was so eager to play him last week is I thought that game was going to be more of a shootout. And when Mahomes is out in the shotgun. Mahomes is checking it down. They're pushing the ball down or pushing the pace. That was going to be McKinnon's chance to get some checkdowns. I don't see that happening. Even if their offense doesn't move the ball.
Yep.
Like you said, they can win 13-10 and be more than happy with that. So I love that call. A guy that I'm avoiding this week, I'm actually going to tie this into one of the questions in the chat. Dylan, how do we feel about Mixon today? Dylan, I'll be honest with you, I am nervous about Joe Mixon today.
Interesting.
I understand he's tough to sit, and your options may not be good enough to sit him. In that regard, like I completely understand because it's Joe Mixon. I mean, we can't fully get away from Joe Mixon. But when I look at my ranks, you have to pull it up real quick. I have him lower than I remember. That's why I want to make sure I get this right. Because if I just say, I got him outside of my top 18. I got him at running back 19 this week.
Wow. Okay.
So
okay.
I am avoiding Joe Mixon if I can. The matchup, Minnesota's been good against the run. It has. And the weird thing is Jake Browning is throwing the ball downfield. Minnesota can be attacked downfield. T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, you're firing up. Tanner Hudson is now a reliable option at tight end. Tight end, 10 points last week, just got a touchdown. Those guys, I think I have more confidence in. Of course, Mixon, the volume will be there. He's going to be their primary guy. But here, I'm going to tell this another question. I'm going to ask this to you, Tumi. Brandon in the chat, is Chase Brown playable? I think that Chase Brown is showing enough to this team that he's going to warrant some opportunities. I don't think he's going to take even 40% of the opportunities, but 35%? I think that's very much on the table as he's been playing. So is Chase Brown playable to you, Tumi?
Yeah, I think Chase Brown is playable. He's been getting, like, as a Mixon owner in multiple leagues, an uncomfortable amount of share to me, like in the backfield.
That's the best way to put it.
Like, it's just
amount of touches.
His touches, if he gets it, like we saw last week, he could take it to the house at any time. He has that big play, that Keaton Mitchell style ability with the limited touches, could put in like a lot of amazing work. So I'm a little higher on Mixon just because his passing volume has been so safe over the last few weeks, but I don't ever love relying on that because Minnesota is actually pretty bad defending. They've actually given up more yards receiving the running backs than on the ground. But I think that speaks more to what you're saying. Like on the ground, they've been just annihilating running backs. So it's a tough one to try. I think Chase Brown, if you're really desperate, you could give it a shot. But that I would play a player like Chase Brown if I was in a situation where, let's say, because of this Thursday game, you happen to play somebody who's really brave and played a lot of those guys. Like they played Jacoby, they played Devontae, they played all these guys, and you need like a ton of upside. Maybe go with somebody like Chase Brown if you're debating between him and like a middling player.
Tumi, you bring this up. I need to vent to you, my friend.
Go ahead.
Part of the reason of having a show on Player Profiler is so that I can learn from some of the best like you and also vent to some of the people in the space. I'm going up against this team. I've been a wagon. I've been so good in this league.
Mm-hmm.
I went up against Zamir White, Josh Palmer, and the Raiders defense.
Wow, the Raiders defense is the one.
brother, let me tell you, I went into this matchup Thursday night being like,
you got it. Yeah.
I'm up 65% on sleeper projections. I'm feeling fine.
Wild,
feeling exact. I wake up the next day like, because I went to bed at half. I was not going to stay up for that. It was 28-0, whatever. And then it was just like, oh, we're not done. Here's 2 defensive touchdowns. Here's Josh Palmer's 78-yard touchdown. It's like, oh, what is happening?
The most outlier of outlier games in the entire world is going to ruin many fantasy seasons this year.
Are you a wrestling fan at all? Do you watch WWE or did you as a kid?
As a kid, yeah.
Yeah, me too. I don't really watch it now, but as a kid, it's always funny because some of all the greats they never go out on wins, right? That's like the unwritten rule. The wrestlers they always go out on spectacular losses. And I was texting some of my buddies like, "Wow, Brandon Staley was going out like a wrestler. He was going out spectacular fashion, baby. He was going down."
Not denying it either. Said, no, I think I'm still a good coach.
Because you know what, he knows Sean McVay's going to bring him right on his staff. He doesn't care because that Sean McVay couldn't help but sing his praises after the game. But that's neither here nor there. We're talking about players to get out of lineups. Who's another player that these fantasy managers cannot start?
Another guy that I'm really trying to avoid. It's tough with Tua. Like
it is tough with Tua.
He's never gotten over 19 fantasy points ever against the Jets, like in his career. And if you, obviously, if you don't have Tyreek Hill, I think it's like a very easy sit. But even if you do have Tyreek Hill, he had him last time, and he only got you like a little bit above 9 points in most leagues. It's a tough one to play. especially with the run defense of the Jets being so bad, actually, with over the last few weeks, how Mostert's looking. Achan is at least practicing. Wilson's probably going to get involved. Like, I could easily see a game script where they just try to heavily run the ball and just try to get out of there with a win.
Yeah, Tua is tough. His playoff schedule's real tough, too. So if you're in a redraft league and you need the space, you can't stash Tua. Maybe it's crazy, but I think you could drop him for some options in there. Like, we're going to talk about some in the bargain bin. Matt Stafford, who is above the threshold, but he has a fantastic matchup, and he's still semi-available. And the matchups for Tua are so tough, and now with the injuries around him are piling up. You are getting into the territory. Is it Flacco? Is it Tua? Is it Gardner Minshew? Is it Tua? Is it Danny DeVito?
Yeah.
Tommy DeVito?
Maybe.
Or Tua. Like, that's unfortunately the level of concern that we're going to be saying when it comes to Tua. We're going to keep this train moving to question number 3, but before we do, Brandon had a follow-up question. I think it's smart here. Tajay or Chase Brown? You said you're only going to play Brown if you kind of really don't have options. I feel like Tajay's that it's the line there. So are you playing Tajay over Brown or Brown over Tajay?
In this game, if this was a game where I thought they were going to have to like chuck the ball a lot more down the field and like be in a competitive game, I would probably say Tajay because of the safe PPR nature. But I honestly, I'm probably going to go with Chase Brown.
Okay, you Chase Brown, that upside, and like you said, he's shown to be pretty electric, even catching short passes. That might be where Minnesota's kind of vulnerable, so he could maybe be exploited there. Real quick, we have a few questions. I just want to get these out of the way. A-Chain or Chandler?
I'm just usually biased. I'm going to always start A-Chain over Chandler just because of the upside, especially in a game where if they get out to a lead, we've seen Mostert really carry a lot of the load early and then kind of cede nearly all the work to A-Chain late, and he just goes crazy. I'd rather just take the shot on that in the playoffs.
Tony G with no Brian Robinson or Kenneth Walker with Zach Charbonnet, half-point PPR?
I'm going to go with Gibson, actually, slightly over Kenneth Walker. The matchup is tougher for Kenneth Walker. He's splitting so much, like you said, with Charbonnet.
I know.
It's just it's hard. If it was like earlier in the season, it's no question Kenneth Walker, but there's just the PPR upside or half PPR upside is just not there. Gibson, I think that Chris Rodriguez is probably going to play way more than we think.
Way more than we want. Way more than we want.
100%. But in this game, like, I think we're probably going to talk about this game a couple times coming up. Like, I want pieces of this game. So I'm going to take Antonio Gibson.
Oh, yeah. We're talking about two, arena football teams playing indoors. This is what we want. This is what we're setting up for. And then Philly hadn't given up crap to running backs until last week when the Cowboys beat them over the head with every single player. So that defense, I think they're going to revert back to being good. He needs an RB and 3 flex. Oh, my God. So Najee, Chandler, Addison, London, Keaton, Pickens, Jaden Reed. Essentially 1 running back and then 3 additionals. What do we got? We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we'll do it this way, Tumi. 3. What's the 3 you're not starting?
The 3 that I'm not starting, I can't start Addison if we're going to be getting Justin Jefferson this week.
Yeah, it looks like we are.
Yeah. I'm Pickens. I'm probably going to kick him out, but I just have no research, no analysis, just vibes. Like, I would not be surprised. Vibes. Like, would you be surprised if he had like 120 yards and a touchdown against that Colts secondary, like versus a team who's giving up 28 points per game at home? The Colts are. Like, I know it's Mitch Trubisky, but would it shock me? Not at all. But if I had to pick somebody to kick out, I'm going to be kicking out Addison. I'm going to be kicking out London, and then Pickens from a receiver standpoint.
Okay.
And then I'm going to start Jaden Reed. I'm getting so confused.
But you're starting Reed for sure. The one thing I will to back you up on your Pickens call, Julius Brents should be back. He's a big cornerback. He is someone who could match up physically with George Pickens. But of course, a 70-yard bomb where he jumps over somebody is always in play. But that's bad process. Okay, last question before we move on to the big questions. Jake Browning or Joe Pretty Boy Flacco?
This is the question of the week, isn't it?
It's the question of the week, baby.
I was initially 100% on the Joe Flacco train over Jake Browning, and I've completely flipped. I'm honestly, both of the matchups are not going to be easy. Brian Flores has gotten really good over the last few weeks, especially just heating up quarterbacks with his blitz rates. But Joe Flacco's facing a team that has 9 interceptions over the last 3 weeks. That's a tough one for me in this weather, where I do think that there's going to be a lot of heavy run. I would not be surprised if Flacco gives us 2+ interceptions. He's given us an interception in every game so far.
That's correct. Yeah, I'm with you there. And Bowley, if you're still in the chat,
careful.
Listen, if you're gonna stick around, Bowley, I recommend we might have some bargain bin options that you might want opposed to these two. Because tough matchups all around. And shout out to your daughter. I love it. I got kids too. I can't help but smile when they come around. I'm usually doing these shows, doing this. Go.
Yep.
They're usually right here playing around, but it's the best. Let's move on to the third big question of the week. Matchups. What are the matchups that we want a part of? We just mentioned how much we want that Rams Commanders matchup. Yeah. But give me some other ones. The ones that if they're these are the matchups, they're gonna break all your ties.
Yeah, I think just really quick on the Rams Commanders, 50.5 point over under. I think it was so over the last 4 games, Rams have allowed a double-digit fantasy point day to 7 wide receivers. I just think that that's amazing for Terry. I think that Curtis Samuel is one of the safer plays you could have. I don't even have to talk about the Rams. You're starting every single Ram you have. I love that game. But outside of that, I'd be remiss to not mention it. And I know it's not always going to carry over year to year. He's having a very different year than he had last year. Derrick Henry versus the Texans. That phenomena is just, he puts up quarterback numbers against them traditionally.
Yes.
His worst game out of the last 5 was 126 and 1 touchdown. His worst game by far. He's usually getting over 200 yards. Now, he didn't have a Tajay Spears there before, so he will be splitting work. But I do think with a really, really banged up Texans team in a game where they're going to be really fighting to stay close, I wouldn't be surprised if he gives us an old school Derrick Henry game in that matchup.
Yeah, and the weather there seems there's some rain in the forecast. It's projecting. We're gonna talk about that in a little bit when I get to the bargain bin. But yeah, it could be a good game. We talked about the narratives in that game. I mean, there's gonna be a lot of. It's gonna be chippy early, no doubt. Divisional rivals. Houston's gonna feel slighted as they see their essential throwbacks on the other team's backs. It's gonna be awesome. I can't wait. One other matchup that I'm definitely gonna try to exploit, and this could go for DFS, this can go for breaking ties in my seasonal leagues, is Arizona and San Francisco. San Francisco is such a favorite that one of two things are going to happen. Either Arizona is going to have garbage time to accumulate some fantasy points, or they're just going to go blow for blow in terms of the offensive weapons that they have. They're coming out of a bye. They're getting healthy. Michael Wilson starting to practice. I don't know if he plays or not, but they still have Hollywood Brown getting healthier. Trey McBride's come on the scene. We just saw James Conner have a big game against his old team, the Pittsburgh Steelers, 2 weeks ago. And then when you look over the last 3 games for the San Francisco 49ers, they're killing teams. They look like the best team in the NFL. But with the bully beatdowns come fantasy points. They've given up the 7th most points to quarterbacks over the last 3. 4th most fantasy points per game to running backs over their last 3. The 2nd most fantasy points allowed per game to wide receivers over their last 3. And the 5th most fantasy points to tight ends over their last 3 games. So they're getting these huge leads, but it's causing teams to play catch up, to have to play a faster pace. So I think that's going to be a sneaky shootout there. I think it's the 3rd highest over under the slate. So I'm going to try to get some pieces of that game as well. But that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get as many pieces in those games as we possibly can. I saw a question in the chat I wanted to add. Oh, Kevin Donahue's in the chat. We talked a little bit about Tajay Spears. We were playing Chase Brown over him. Keaton Mitchell, we like Keaton Mitchell. We talked about him briefly in the beginning. But then you brought up Curtis Samuel being a part of that matchup. So his question is Mitchell, Spears, or Samuel. Are you going Samuel over these other 2?
If it's a full PPR league, I actually would. Like I said, in the last 4 games, they've given up double-digit fantasy points to 7 receivers, and I think they've given over 17.8 PPR points to 4 in the last 4 games. Curtis Samuel's rivaling them for the target lead on that team in an incredibly high-scoring game. I just think in PPR, very safe.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, I think in PPR I'm going with you. I think I'm going to go. He's been I was trying to think of how I want to put this. When he was healthy, he was a sneaky good starter weekly.
Yeah.
He just kept popping. He was scoring a lot of fantasy points. He was getting the easiest of the matchups in terms of the defensive secondaries. So I think I'm going to go Curtis Samuel, especially if it's PPR.
Yep.
One more question. Let's see what we got in the chat here. OBJ or Josh Downs in half-point PPR?
Yeah. I'm gonna go with OBJ. I'm a Colts fan, so anytime I give Colts analysis, there's just add a little bit of bias to it. I really want to believe in Josh Downs in this matchup because I think that this could be a sneaky, crazy shootout. The Colts, Colts home games go for the over every time.
Yeah.
Like Shane Steichen puts up points at home. Gardner Minshew plays lights out usually at home. That offense really churns, and they give up, like I said, over 28 points a game at home over the last few weeks. On the season, actually. Over 28 points a game on the season.
That's crazy.
But I just think OBJ is just a much more reliable asset in the offense. So I got to go with him. Like you're much safer to get 12 to 13 PPR points with OBJ.
I think that's exactly where my thoughts lie. Sometimes this is the lamest answer, but it can be the most helpful for people listening. Is if you look at it and you're going against a mountain of a team, you need the highest upside. I think I'm going to go Downs here, but if you just need that 12 points, you need that 10 points, you need a good base, OBJ is your guy on Sunday Night Football. So we talked about some of the matchups that we want to target. To me, let's look at the negative side here. Who are some of the team matchups we just don't want? We want nothing of it. We're gonna look elsewhere for fantasy points.
I alluded to it earlier with like two of the players I want to avoid, but this Patriots Chiefs game, I can't keep talking about it more. I hate every single player basically in this game outside of Zeke and like the Chiefs defense. I really don't want to start Patrick Mahomes. Like the Patriots defense, I don't think people understand. Over the last 4 weeks, they've been top 10 against every single fantasy position except for the DST, basically. So like even kickers, they're not giving up anything to anyone. You're not benching Mahomes if you don't have a better option, but Mahomes is outside of my top 8 quarterbacks right now. Kelsey, he's not my number 1 tight end, which is, I think, for him, enough of an indictment in itself. Rasheed Rice, I love Rasheed Rice, and I think he's safe in PPR, but I can't put him as high as I'd really like to. It's just, and I talked about the running backs. I have no interest in the running backs in this game. Like we talked about before, the Chiefs will be happy to win this game 13-10, 13-3, and just get out of there.
Yeah, they want to get out of Dodge. They need a win as badly as any team in the playoffs. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I have Mahomes in my home league. Luckily, I got a bye this week.
Oh, good.
That was very nice because I also have Stephon Diggs and CeeDee Lamb, and that leads me to the matchup that I'm not staying away from. But I do want to. I want to say this. I need to say this to me.
Okay.
Dallas at Buffalo could underperform in the fantasy department. Okay.
I applaud you for that boldness. That is because I feel it back here. I haven't said it.
Yeah.
Like I appreciate that.
There will be fantasy points to be scored. There will be. I know if you have Josh Allen, you have Stephon Diggs, you have CeeDee Lamb, it's not like you can't play them. You have to play them. But what I'm saying this is the weather seems bad, a lot of wind. It seems like this team, 2 teams that need wins, again, will resort with their good defenses to get out of there without scoring 55 points. Both teams will be more than happy to keep everyone healthy and come out with a hard-fought win. The reason why I'm saying this, though, is if you're banking on like I said, I have in my home league, I have Lamb and Diggs in the same team. Normally, I would be saying, let's fire these boys up and everything else can follow they may. If you have these players and your decisions and your flex and otherwise are boom bust, I would suggest going more towards those boom guys and the safe guys.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if they're going to hit their projections as easily as, we thought they would have. When we looked at this game on the schedule in the beginning of the year, we were like, oh, baby, Buffalo and Dallas, let's go. We love this. Why is this not primetime? We love it. But it's not. It's 4:30. That's like the worst time up in the Northeast here. I'm in Massachusetts. I know that Buffalo, they're way more, Northwest than I am. When it starts getting dark, it starts getting raw. I'm just saying, proceed with caution. Don't bench these guys. Don't get nervous about them. You got to play them. But your other decisions, you may want higher ceiling plays than floor plays. So I guess this isn't a matchup that I'm staying away from, but it's certainly a matchup that I need to proceed with caution. And we've kind of talked about all the other ones too, like Minnesota, Cincinnati. We don't love that today. We don't love Cleveland, Chicago,
Mhm.
even though I love Jerome Ford, because sometimes in these hard-fought games, you want the running back because that's the check down. 3 check downs, a good run, and he's good to go.
Yep.
So we've kind of covered a lot of the matchups that we're staying away from. And now I'm bringing up a matchup that I think people are excited about. I'm sorry, everyone. Don't throw the tomatoes. Hold them back. I don't want to be yelled at here. I understand that we're all excited about it, but it's tough. We look in the chat here. Kyle S. Hurts or Purdy?
Wow.
Ooh,
We've gotten
this is a
there.
polarizing answer.
I'm going Hurts. And I think that, like, on an 8-day layover, like the Philly team, they've just been exhausted. On an 8-day layover, I think they're going to come back and they're going to put up a lot of points. It is not as far as it was, obviously, even a few weeks ago. I think Purdy is like right behind Hurts in my personal rankings. They're both like in the top 4, top 5.
Oh, for sure. I mean, this is a tough decision, but come on, you would be more. This is how I look at some of these decisions. If you play Hurts and he doesn't play well, and Purdy does, you're gonna go, you know what? Hurts let me down.
Mm-hmm.
If you start Purdy and Hurts goes off, you're gonna be like, that's on me. That's a fantasy loss that I have to shoulder because I didn't start the guy who got me here. So I'm gonna go with Hurts too, and a little bit of a. I know it's not easy because Purdy's been playing. I mean, dude's doing perfect games.
Mm-hmm.
But we've also seen what can happen against a team that they score, but he does not throw the ball. Remember Seattle 3 weeks ago? He was fantastic. But you had 3 rushing touchdowns, 2 from Debo, 1 from CMC, however it played out. And he didn't have any fantasy points.
That could easily happen. I mean, the Arizona, this matchup for CMC, like he could score more than Purdy himself.
He had 50 points last time. He had 4 total touchdowns the last time he played this team. So, yeah, absolutely. Well, one more question in the chat. We got to start 2. Okay, so we're talking – this is a start 2 right here, to me.
Mm-hmm.
Jefferson, Chase, Metcalf, Sutton, Rice, or Cook?
I'm probably – man, that's tough.
Who's she taking?
I got to go with Jefferson. I think she is not interested in anyone here. She's like, I don't like this. I don't like this lightning bets. But me, I think I'm gonna go with Jefferson. Man, I'm gonna go with Metcalf over Chase. I got to do it. Like the matchup is just so phenomenal, especially if Darius Slay is not in the game at home. I just talked about Geno Smith, and I also think that Justin Jefferson, if he plays like how much he was involved so early, it seems like the game plan is to get Justin Jefferson the ball if he's on the field. So there's literally no way in the world I'm sitting Justin Jefferson. And I got to go with the upside of Metcalf.
Was he 2 for 20?
Yeah, 2 for like 20 within like the first few plays. Like they were just like, give him the ball.
And he came out and was like, I'm playing. So he wants to get out there. He's itching to get wins. And this team is a playoff team. This is the Minnesota Vikings are a playoff caliber team. They're trying to make the playoffs. So I agree with you there. Last question before we move on to the bargain bin, Tumi. I'm going to give you the floor.
All right.
What's your bold prediction for Week 15?
Man, I have 2. There's one related to Jaden Reed and there's one related to Matt Stafford. I'm going to go with Matt Stafford. I think he's going to finish as a top 3 quarterback. I think it's you know what? Top 3. I'm not going to go not number 1, but he's going to be top 3. Like he's gonna beat one of Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen over the head because I mean he is facing the matchup of all matchups in the Commanders at home. Getting Cooper Kupp, him like aligned together again. Puka's healthy. They are going to chuck it down the field. Kyron Williams, they actually give up a lot of receiving touchdowns to running backs. Like he could even chuck a few to him too. The Washington Commanders over the last 3 weeks, I don't think it's like understood enough. They've given up a 140 passer rating to quarterbacks over the last 3 weeks. The next worst team is a 108. Like it is a historically terrible defense.
And they just cut one of their cornerbacks too.
Yeah, they cut one of the cornerbacks. The one thing that's interesting is Emmanuel Forbes, even though he was getting clowned early in the year, he actually started playing a lot better, and he made play. Yeah, and there's something in the back of my head that's like coming off a bye, Ron Rivera getting another week with his defense. They may be better, but even if they're better, if they get a lot better, they'll be awful. You know what I mean? Like they're coming from such a terrible
bad
base.
to awful.
Yeah, like this is just. I was about to say, there's no way he could fail.
Don't do it. Don't do it. So then Liv is asking in the chat, Hurts or Stafford?
I'm going Hurts slightly over Stafford. That's one of those situations, like you said, I will beat myself up if I started Stafford over Hurts, but it is very close.
And if Stafford's a top 3 play, Hurts could be a top 1. He could be the best. So I mean, I get that. I need to hear it now. What's your Jaden Reed bowl take? Let's get into it.
Oh yeah. So Jaden Reed, I think that he's a top 20 receiver easily. If he gets 5 touches, he's a top 25 receiver. I didn't go with that one because honestly, it's not even really that bold. He's actually been performing.
He's been
pretty close to that anyway. And Christian Watson's not going to be there potentially. Like he's doubtful for the game. Yeah, like I got to rock with him.
Yeah, Jaden Reed. If you have any lineup questions regarding Jaden Reed, don't get him in. No Davis this week for Tampa, and I do believe they're missing one of their linebackers too, which is going to help a guy like Jaden Reed who gets those jet sweeps. They try to get him the ball in a number of creative ways. So we love Jaden Reed. G-Hop in the chat. James Cook, Flowers, or Rashee Rice. Flowers is my start of the week, so I'm going with him. But who are you going with?
I like Flowers in PPR. I like him definitely over Rashee Rice. Yeah, in PPR for sure. I'm going to go with Flowers.
Let's do it. Start 2 in half-point PPR. Shane, Singletary, or Downs. He's concerned about the health of Shane.
If he plays, I play him. I'm gonna ride or die with that shit based on the upside. But the other guy I'm gonna play is Singletary. Singletary was this close. I was this close to saying he would be one of my must starts because like the matchup is surprisingly good because they just waived Tahir Tart, who was their really, really good run stuffing nose tackle. They were just having contract issues in Tennessee. Jeffrey Simmons is not going to play. And again, I think this is a situation where if they're going to get out of that field with a win, they have to just give the ball to Singletary and Pierce and just get out. You know?
I agree. And then if Shane doesn't play, then you've got your answer for you. All right, Tumi. This is the best part of the show. This is my favorite part of the show. This is the bargain bin. We do it every week. We go diving. These are players who are rostered in less than 50% of platforms. Feel free to talk about whichever platform you would like. But we're going to help these listeners scratch a claw their way to a Week 15 playoff victory. So what is your quarterback in the bargain bin?
Man, this is gross. It's so gross, and I apologize already.
But we're deep. That's what you do with the bargain bin. You go deep,
everyone's deep. You get your gloves. You're going deep into the bin to shuffle around. And you're going to pull out Mitch Trubisky.
Oh.
Yep. That's I can't like even say it. I'm talking about Mitch Trubisky, who was a top 10 quarterback last week in a comeback effort. And I'm not even saying that that's going to happen in this game, but like I've been alluding to it the whole time. The Colts at home are an over team like no other, giving up over 28 points to the opposing team every game. They're scoring in the 27-ish range. Like these are just almost locked in shootouts. We've alluded to it. George Pickens, I wouldn't be surprised if he has a great day. Deontay Johnson, I wouldn't be surprised if he's decent in PPR. The running backs, the matchup is the second best matchup on the week. I think that there's just a lot of opportunities for the Steelers to produce way more offense than they've been giving up in the last few games. So I do think that Mr. Trubisky, I'm talking about desperate. Like if you're desperate. And he's in my top 22 quarterbacks, let's just say that. But he's not in the 30s where he usually is.
But listen, this week teams may be desperate, and this goes for 1 QB leagues as well. A lot of these streamer options got tough matchups. If you don't have one of the top dogs, or if you've been relying on CJ Stroud, you're going to have to look at some of these players. So Mitch Trubisky, I held it in because you gave good reasons. I was able to hold it back. But yeah, that's a tough one. The guy I'm going to go with the bargain bin is Will Levis this week. QB 17 in my ranks. He's rostered in about 20% of ESPN leagues, 26 on Sleeper, so he's pretty widely available. The matchup is towards the bottom of the slate, 36.5, but we've talked about the narratives surrounding this and why, this could spark some excitement. They are 4-point home favorites with CJ Stroud out, Nico Collins out, which is surprising. But Houston, they give up 262 passing yards per game, which is good for a guy like Levis, who's coming off a pretty strong game last week. He gave 327 yards in Week 14, so that was pretty good. They have the 8th most fantasy points a game allowed to quarterbacks this season, and they've actually given up more recently. They've given up the 5th most fantasy points to quarterbacks over their last 3. Houston is good against the run, and they've been really good lately, so that might cause Tennessee to have to kind of funnel their offense to the air. And I love dropping some bro science to me. I love dropping bro science. You talked about vibes earlier.
Give it to me.
This is cut from the same cloth. This is bro vibes. DeMeco Ryans is a defensive-minded head coach, a former linebacker
Mhm.
for the Houston Texans. Something tells me my gut that he is going to put all of his resources, he is going to get his team pumped up to stop Derrick Henry
I can see that.
and challenge Will Levis to beat them.
Yeah.
So I have the stats don't necessarily play it out to this. We talked about the rain in the forecast earlier, why that might be a better for Derrick Henry. But the bro science, I mean, look, I got the backwards snapback. I got bro in me.
Yeah.
Bro science is telling me that Ryans is going to come out. And Will Levis, he's been pretty good this year. He hasn't really been a fantasy monster in terms of the output, but he's had a pretty good deep ball. He's finished top 10 in deep ball accuracy rating, deep ball catchable pass rate, and his air yards per attempt is first in among the qualified quarterbacks. So he could be efficient and get the job done, especially if Ryans challenges his defense to stop Derrick Henry, who has 6 touchdowns over the last 3 weeks and has been a bully, I think is the nicest way I could say it.
That's
to this
the nicest
franchise.
thing to say.
He's been a bully to the Houston Texans franchise for a long time. So they may challenge Will Levis, and I think he has that dog in him. He does have the ability to step up in big games. We saw it last week. I mean, that was incredible. So I'm going to the Will Levis. Well, let's get to running back to me. I'm excited for you to hear your bargain bin running back because mine, Mitch Trubisky had forced me to hold back a little bit of, vomit, if you will, fantasy vomit, but mine may cause you to upchuck everywhere. You might want to tell your daughter to stay clear because daddy might be throwing up when I get mine. Gotcha. You might be, but I want to hear yours first.
All right. It's kind of this was a little Kenneth Gainwell. Kenneth Gainwell is the guy who I think that is a decent play in the bargain bin. Yep. This team has been horrendous against running backs. And while that a lot of people this week I've heard on all the shows are saying like DeAndre Swift, he's going to really break out this week. He hasn't had a missed tackle in 2 straight games. He just seems like he may be running into a wall now. Kenneth Gainwell's getting goal line work. Kenneth Gainwell's getting third down work. He's getting like closer to 50-50 snap share with him now. And Seattle giving up 5.3 yards per carry, second most running back rush yards, 26 red zone attempts, and 5 touchdowns in the last 4. It's just there's a lot of reason. Well, yes, obviously all those things could play into Swift having a great game. But I do think that Gainwell, he's just on the field so much. And the red zone touchdowns, that stat kind of doesn't mean anything in Philly. But he's at least on the field on a good offense who's going to likely score a lot. And I think that there are much worse places to get 10-plus PPR points if you're desperate.
The Gainwell was actually Kenny Gainwell was someone that kind of made my final list of running backs I wanted to talk about. I ended up not talking about it. Okay, of course, Ty Chandler was an obvious one to talk about, but I knew we would kind of talk about him throughout. Same thing with Tony Gibson. Like we've kind of talked about him throughout. But DeAndre Swift, the point you bring up, I think people really need to listen to what you're saying. Swift has not been good lately.
Yeah.
He has not had 10-plus PPR points since week 11 against the Chiefs.
Yeah.
He's only had 1 double-digit fantasy game since their bye. And what do we know about the Eagles is that they like Gainwell. I mean, Sirianni wore a Gainwell shirt to oppress him.
That matters. That really does. We need to pay attention to that stuff.
It does. You do. And on top of that, I mean, they went to Gainwell last year in the most important part of the season. They were like, Miles Sanders, you can kind of play, but we're going to trust Gainwell. We might be getting into the Gainwell part of the season. Yeah. And we might not know it. So I love that Gainwell call, trying to get ahead. 314 skipped my Lou with the super chat. Shout out to you. That's awesome. So you will skip to the head of the line. You will get your question answered before I even get to my running back in the bargain bin. But pick 2 in full point PPR to me. David Montgomery, Zach Moss, Tony Pollard, Raheem Mostert, Derrick Henry. So 314 skip to my Lou. This was a chance for you to just humbly brag that you would probably have the best running back room in the league.
Like, what are we talking about?
What are we doing here? What are we doing here?
Oh my gosh. Like the Henry thing is such like a conundrum because I honestly, you got me with the bro science, man. Like that is a thing that I could easily see DeMeco Ryan put up Derrick Henry's last 5 games where he does some bad stuff to this team. Like he really dominates them.
Yes.
And Derrick Henry does not look the same as he's looked in the past. If we have no HN, I think clearly Mostert to me would be the number 1 of this group. And I don't mind Pollard, but as of now, I'm gonna still rock with Henry. I think he's at least gonna fall into the end zone and be safe in that situation. And like you said, I'm a little scared of the Bills Dallas game a little bit with Pollard. Moss, I think he'll bounce back a little bit, but not to the level of the old two guys at the end of the list.
So it was actually a pick 3. He meant pick 3.
Three.
So we got a bonus
Okay,
pick 3. So now you get to pick an extra one. So
okay.
Through the 3 guys.
If I could throw in an extra one for me, then it would be Tony Pollard. I'd throw him in the mix too. The Bills, they've actually given up a decent amount of receiving work to running backs, and even though that's not been Tony Pollard's bag this whole year, I do think that he'll catch a couple passes and be a nice start. So I'm going to go with the last 3 on this list.
This is a good list. I mean, every single one of these running backs are in my top 20. To be more matter of fact, they're all in my top 17. So I like them all. It's a tough decision to make, but I'm definitely going Montgomery. I'm definitely going with – I'm just going off my ranks here. I'm going to go Montgomery. I'm going to go Pollard. And I'm going to go Mostert if A-Chain doesn't play. If he does play, then I will pivot and I will go Derrick Henry.
Gotcha.
So I'm definitely going Montgomery. I'm definitely going Pollard. And then it's either Mostert or Henry based on A-Chain's health status. So shout out to you, 314. Skipped my little. Hopefully you get this win. Hopefully we can help you get this win. Also, what a running back room. If you were in my league, I'd be asking you to freaking give me some of these guys because I could use a running back or 2 on some of my leagues. So, so if you don't have the options that our guy Skipped My Lou has, which is fantastic, and you need to get into the bargain bin, to me, I'm sorry. If you had a good breakfast, you may lose it. I apologize.
Let's go.
But I'm going to say Patrick Taylor.
Wow, not a bad one. That's not bad.
Patrick Taylor. So as of right now, I have him ranked at running back 57. So he's lower in my ranks, but this is a fluid situation that you're going to have to pay attention to. So sorry. Sometimes you come to the game plan, I give you some homework, some stuff that you have to do on your own. This is part of it. He's not rostered anywhere. You can get him pretty much everywhere. It's the over-under of 42.5 is the middle of the slate, so Vegas is projecting some fantasy points. And they're giving 3.5 points at home to the Buccaneers. So it's essentially a pick 'em because you pretty much give 3 points if you're a home team. Tampa Bay has been bad against the run recently. They have been good over the course of the season, but over the last 3 games, they've given up the 5th most fantasy points to running backs on a per-game basis, and they give up 1.38 running back points over league average to the receiving backs. So Patrick Taylor, we don't know exactly where he's going to lie in this game, but I do know A.J. Dillon has a broken thumb. I do know that Aaron Jones cannot get healthy after spraining that MCL again. And even if he does play, is he limited? Does he leave early? Again, this is the most desperate of plays if you're in the most desperate of situations at running back. But Patrick Taylor has been crazy efficient. Very, very limited sample size, so it's easy to boost your efficiency metrics when you don't play a ton. But 7.4 yards per touch over his last 3 games. If he gets more touches and he can keep that semi around, I think there's a chance that we could see Patrick Taylor burst onto the scene in this game, especially with the health. I mean, I know Dillon's labeled questionable, but a broken thumb on a running back that's a bruiser. The reports that came out from Packers camp this week was he's been wearing a brace, and they're concerned that he may have fumble issues, ball security issues with that broken thumb. And Aaron Jones is a trooper. I mean, this is a guy that should have gone on the IR and given the full 4 weeks to recover. He keeps trying to come back, but clearly he's not right.
Yep.
Because he can't come back to the field. And last week was a game that I think they could have used a guy like Aaron Jones, even though it seemed like an easier matchup. But, Giants are coming off a bye, Monday Night Football. They would have loved to have Aaron Jones, and he couldn't get healthy. So I'm monitoring the situation, and as long as one of them is ruled out, I'm firing up Patrick Taylor in my most desperate situation. So Patrick Taylor there, he's pretty much universally rostered, and he's someone you could kind of pick up last minute if you want to wait. So now let's move over to wide receiver. Tumi, who is your wide receiver in the bargain bin?
This one, it's not as I feel bad. It's not like a bargain bin, but he's definitely owned in less than 50% of leagues. Zay Jones. I think that you got to pick up Zay Jones if he's available. This is one of those matchups that screams somebody other than Calvin Ridley is going to have a good day. Calvin Ridley struggles with that press man, an elite corner. All of those things really speak the language of what Baltimore is going to try to do on Sunday night. And then Zay Jones, the targets have been phenomenal. 8 targets a week ago, 14 targets last week. Not efficient. Like he only caught like 5 passes.
Right.
But the opportunity is going to be there. Last year when they played Baltimore, he went crazy. Like he has the upside to have an amazing game. He's going to be seen as like the man coverage beater versus a Calvin Ridley since there's no Christian Kirk anymore. And it's a tougher matchup for Evan Ingram, who I still like. Calvin Ridley, like I mentioned, he just struggles in these types of matchups. I would not be surprised if he gives us like 30 yards. And Trevor Lawrence, I still think he's going to have a decent day in a game where they're going to have to compete. So I do think that Zay Jones is just one of those guys that I absolutely love. Like he is just – I like him now, and I also like him. I think they play Tampa Bay next week. I'm a fan of that.
Yeah. Yeah, so then it's not just straight streamer appeal. He could be your bargain bin play 2 weeks in a row, and sometimes that does boost the value. My wide receiver is I just want a piece of that Rams Commanders game. We talked about it earlier why we want it, but I'm going with Demarcus Robinson. Nice. We talked about the matchup. He's only rostered 9% of sleeper league, so he's out there. Washington, they give up the second most receiving touchdowns per game, almost 2. They give up the most receiving yards allowed per game, nearly 200 to wide receivers. You mentioned how the quarterback rating against them is so exponentially high. It's insane how good quarterbacks can be against them. And they've given up the second most fantasy points per game to wide receivers on the entire year. They've been bad. And Robinson, over his past 2 games, it seems like McVay's elevated him over Tutu Atwell. He's going to be it's tough to call him the slot receiver considering Kupp plays in the slot, Nakua plays in the slot, but he's the wide receiver 3 in this offense. And over the last 2 games, he's had an over 72% snap share. He's run 30 routes per game. He's gotten 7.5 targets per game, 5 total red zone targets over those 2 games. So they're looking for him in very important measures. And he scored 14.6 fantasy points. He's averaged 14.6 fantasy points over his last 2. So he's been good. That's the guy I'm going to go in the bargain bin. I see this question pop up. I got to ask you, Tumi, Robinson or Samuel?
I'm still going to go with Samuel just because they just like him, it seems, near the red zone especially. And I like the upside of Demarcus Robinson, but I think that Curtis Samuel is just probably more of a slightly more integrated part of his offensive scheme. I
agree. And the Samuel doesn't have 2 guys on his team that could go crazy. We like McLaurin. Johan Dotson's a good player, but they don't have the insane, like if we could be talking next week to me and we see 20 combined targets for Nakua and Kupp, they go berserk, and Robinson gets 3 targets and catches all 3 of them for 30 yards, but that's not enough. I like the Samuel pick there over him, but he's over 50% roster, so he's not in the bargain, but he doesn't qualify. So I'm going to go Robinson if you're desperate, but if you have an option like Samuel, I'll go in Samuel over Robinson. Now we're going to move on to tight end, and tight end is the most important here in the bargain bin because even teams who are good, teams are not in desperate situations, may be looking to stream at tight end, maybe looking to add guys and play them. So to me, who is your tight end here in the bargain bin?
This guy, man, I'm gonna go back to my roots. He's one of my Nigerian brethren. I'm in most of my leagues, but there's this one league that's the most important one to me, but I'm not in the playoffs in it. And so in that league, I lost Mark Andrews, and I just subbed in this guy over the last few weeks, and I literally wasn't paying attention. And then 4 of the last 5 weeks, he's been the top 20 PPR tight end. I'm talking about Chig Okonkwo, like kind of tied to Will Levis, like tied to that game. I do think that he honestly doesn't even really need that many opportunities to make a big play. He's just been really consistent. Over 5 targets in those games I've mentioned where he got his last 4 or 5 over 20 PPR points. I think that he's just a really solid option. He's a top 17 tight end for me, which is kind of, the range what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And if you're just really desperate, a guy who's going to be getting that many targets, who also has that yards after the catch ability to maybe make something bigger happen, I'm going to just take that against this Houston matchup. The 5th most yards to the tight end position. He could break them open.
Yeah, and we've talked about now this matchup throughout the whole show, how I like Levis, you like Hopkins, so we like the passing game, I think, more than most. Chig Okonkwo could absolutely be part of that, no doubt about it. He was one of the guys that was kind of in my final cut for tight end, but I'm going to give my tight end here in a second. But before I do, we got to hear from one of our sponsors.
This episode is brought to you by Rival Fantasy. Rival Fantasy, the coolest fantasy platform not enough people know about, but they will once I'm done, baby, because they're always innovating. They just rolled out seasonal leagues. We set them up for patrons, for our listeners, and they funded over $1,000 in payouts. That's what Rival's all about. They're always innovating. They already had the fantasy book where you can take overs and unders, stack them up, multiply your payout, but then they added challenges so you can set your own lines and put them out there for the community, and then you can browse the community's lines and say, hey, this guy's crazy, I'm going to take the other side. It's cool. And they have fantasy bingo. Rival Fantasy is reminding me how much fun I can have with fantasy football, and use that promo code PLAYER. The promo code is PLAYER. They give you a $100 instant deposit match plus $25 plus a free play. That promo code is PLAYER for up to $125 in deposit bonus and a free play. You can't beat it.
Matty Kiwoom, the game plan, joined by my man Tumi. Conversation was so good, I almost forgot to run the ad. The conversation's been too good. I completely spaced out the ad, but we were able to get it in. We're talking bargain bin players here. We're on the tight end position. And I'm going to go with Tucker Kraft. Two of my bargain bin players are part of this. The battle of the base, Green Bay versus Tampa Bay. But I got Tucker Kraft as my tight end 14. So similar range to what you were talking about. You had your tight end 17. I got tight end 14. The matchup, again, middle of the road. I talked about the matchup. I talked about Taylor. But Tampa Bay, they've given up 6 receptions allowed to tight ends per game and 60 yards allowed per game to tight ends. So if they keep that going, that's anywhere from 10 to 12 fantasy points in your PPR leagues. It's the 8th best matchup overall for tight end. Like that matchup. And since Musgrave's been out, he's been out for, I think this is going to be his 4th game out or 3rd game out. So in that span, Kraft's seen 4 targets. He's caught 3 of them for 38.5 yards per game, and he's averaged tight end 14. But he does have 2 top 12 finishes without Musgrave. So I think they go back to using Kraft. Christian Watson is going to open up more opportunities. We'll see how the running backs play out, but again, with the injuries at that position, they may decide to throw it with Jordan Love a little bit more. And they've shown the ability to, craft things for guys like Tucker Kraft.
Wow.
Very much intended. So I'm going to go with a little bit of Tucker Kraft here in the bargain bin. So we've been over an hour. Tumi, I appreciate you so much for jumping on. Let's answer a few questions in the chat, and then I'll let you get out here and enjoy your football Saturday.
Yep.
So Rock Page Redraft League half-point PPR. Would you start at quarterback Murray, Browning, or Howell?
I'm starting Howell. Again, we can't keep talking about the pieces of this game. 50.5 point over-under, I think is rather safe, and the other matchups are rather difficult, honestly.
They are, including Kyler Murray. Like Kyler Murray could have a game in garbage time. He could do it. He could provide value, but I'm not benching Sam Howell today. No way. I'm not doing it. Yep. This week, Chig or Cole Kmet? You mentioned Chig Okonkwo in your bargain bin, but you're going to go Chigoziem or Cole Kmet here?
I'm definitely. I appreciate you going full name. I'm definitely gonna. I'm gonna go Cole Kmet still though. Just in this matchup, especially DJ Moore. He's off the injury report, but maybe not fully healthy. No other receivers are doing anything in Chicago, and I do think you could take advantage of Cleveland in that particular way.
They are pretty susceptible to being beaten with opposing tight ends. Need 2 of these running backs: Cook, Moss, and Chandler.
For me, I'm going Cook and Moss.
Me too.
Yeah,
it's pretty easy for me.
Yeah, there's not even too much discussion on that one.
Yeah, we love that matchup for Moss, and then James Cook. Ever since they fired their offensive coordinator, Joe Brady's been the guy. He is scheming up beautiful plays for James Cook, and James Cook is the reason why they beat the Chiefs. He was the reason why they beat the Chiefs, so they'll go back to that well. I'm pretty confident in that. I think you got your 2 running backs. Chandler, Gibson, or Laporta in standard scoring. Ooh, a little running back, or tight end action here.
Yeah, in standard scoring, man, I hate doing this, but I'm probably going to play Laporta. Like, I hate doing that. Like, it's just the matchup is amazing. I think it's a good matchup for him in particular.
Yeah, I like the matchup. I like that, get him in today, get it out, get out of your way today. And Chandler and Gibson, I think too much of their appeal is the passing game. Mm-hmm. So if you're not going to get points for reception, then you're going to potentially lose out on 3 to 5 to 6 to 7 fantasy points. So I'm going to go with Sam Laporta because he's just a better overall player. Robinson or Gabe Davis?
Oh, God. You please answer first.
I'm going DeMarcus Robinson. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Gabe Davis could have 2 receptions and both of them could be long touchdowns. But I don't bet on my process I don't like that. I don't like betting on those things. I don't like betting on windy conditions in a game where you want deep balls. I'm going to Marcus Robinson. I'm crazy to do it, but I'm going with it.
I agree with you. I can't play Gabe Davis. Like, he keeps giving you zeros.
Right. I mean, his floor is 0. I don't think Robinson's floor is 0. So I'm going to go with DeMarcus Robinson's crazy. Last one, and we'll get you out of here. 2 running backs, Cooks, Brees, or Mixon.
This is tough. This is really tough. I'm probably going to throw, man, that's really tough. I'm going to go James Cook. I can't get, like, the heater he's on. I got to stick with James Cook. I'm going to go Brees. And it's close, man. It's close between him and Mixon. I'm kind of flip-flopping on those two, honestly.
I'm going to go Hall if in PPR. I'm going to go Hall and Cook in PPR.
Yeah.
But they're all good options. They're all really good options. If you can bump out a flex and get them all in. I know I talked caution with Mixon, so that's why I'm going to go Brees, and then Brees is like second behind just McCaffrey in receiving yards.
Mm-hmm.
So even in the tough matchup, he can get plenty of checkdowns. So that might be weird. No Hill, limited, chain or no A chain. It's going to be tough. It's going to be a weird game. But Rob Page, thank you guys so much. Must be great. Shoot, thank you for tuning in. Thanks, guys, Tumi, and thank you so much for coming on the game plan. I had a blast. Like I said, I almost forgot to run the ad. I'm probably going to get the conversation was so good. But the floor is yours. Promote all the shows you're working on. Where can the people find Tumi?
Yeah. So you guys could find me on TikTok for the most part. I have my own personal thing, Fantasy Football Strategist, but obviously doing a lot of work with Player Profiler. So make sure you go give that account a follow on TikTok. And then I also started a show last week with my friend. We're doing a show called Hits and Misses, like we talked about earlier, where right after all the action ends, you come right to us and just download all your feelings. Download all the stuff that happened today. Just let us know everything that happened. Typically, it's going to be on Sundays at 7:30. This week, it's going to be on Monday around 10:15. So make sure you guys keep an eye out for that. It'll be right after the Monday Night Football game. So we'll have a full debrief of Week 15.
Yeah, go ahead and hang out with Tumi and Eric, right? That's your co-host, Eric?
Yep.
Eric and Tumi, rock with them. The first show's awesome. Check that out on the Player Profiler channel. And then, yes, if you need to go vent, if you need to brag, if you need to do anything, you can rock with them. Just kind of exhale after the first round of the playoffs with Tumi and Eric on Hits and Misses. You can find me on X. I'm at Matty Kiwoom. Make sure you're subscribed to the Player Profiler YouTube channel. Like this video. Leave a comment. I will check if you have any start-sit questions you want to leave in there. Go ahead and do it. I'll get back to it. Go over to the Executives of Fantasy Football YouTube channel. You got The Hurdle, our Sunday night watch along with me and Cody Carpentier. And if you just cannot get enough of me, well, you're in luck because the Future Cast with me and Theo is up and running. We just did a 1 QB rookie mock with Cody. We did the Superflex rookie mock a couple weeks ago. So be on the lookout for that show. It'll be out a whole bunch. And then Blue Chips, my new show going to be debuting here in the Player Profiler network of shows. Devi, Dynasty, any college football, prospects, NFL draft, all that stuff there over at Blue Chips. You can find it. And if you still just can't get enough of me, head over to patreon.com/executives. Tumi, thank you so much. Again, I really, really appreciate it. It was a great show. But I'm going to have to hold it to you. You're going to have to come on again. I'm going to have to get you on again.
100%. This was super fun, man.
That was too much fun. That was great. So everybody just keep game planning, my friends, and I will see you next week. Peace.
Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All In Package to continue to make all of this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.